Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for another exciting session of the Daz Plus Pro Artist Series. Why's my picture gone all fuzzy here? There we go. It's not less fuzzy now. Good to see you all. The Changeling Chick is here. The Dragonate is here. Jeff is here. How you doing? Where you from now, Jeff? Is it New Zealand or are you in France? Just checking. There's also Timothy. Timothy's here. Thank you for that tidbit of information about Arizona. I do like that. Do appreciate that. Very good to see you. Who else do we have? Dartenbeck. He was here earlier. He's already ready and he's excited. Me too. I'm really, really glad that you could make it. Dartenbeck, in case you don't know, Dartenbeck is an avid Daz animator and he's made some amazing things with Daz figures inside Daz Studio. So very, very exciting. I think a few of your latest Digital Art Live courses have been just released on the Daz store. And also much congratulations. I believe you're becoming a vendor again, a proper PA at Daz. So that's gonna be great. I've had a super tiny peek at some of the products Dartenbeck's gonna be releasing. And of course, they're all animation focused, so very, very cool. Anyone else who hasn't gotten a shout out, I do apologize. I just didn't see you, overlooked you. Like X201, for example, didn't mean to overlook you there. Super nice to see you. Hey, thank you so much for dropping the vote in this little poll that I've made there. I just wanted to gauge the temperature in the room, as they say, to see how many of you are avid animation users, which ones of you are sort of new to the topic of animations, and which ones of you are intermediate users, because there's no point in me banging on about the advanced features when you don't even know the basics. So I'm hoping I can bring you a little bit of a mix of people who would like to know more about animations, but they currently don't know much about it. People who've always wanted to get more out of their animations, and people who've gotten to a certain point, but they wish they could extract new features from Daz Studio. There's a few things I'm going to talk about. So basics, timeline basics, and there's going to be the Animate features. We can animate directly in Animate. That sounds crazy, but Animate is this separate product that you can unlock to get the full version. Everyone has a light version of Animate, and Animate differs from the regular timeline in that it is a non-linear animation controller. Let me just go and take everything away that I have in the scene here, so that we have a completely empty, brand new Daz Studio. So we've got these two things. We've got the timeline and we've got Animate. And the timeline is keyframes, the traditional keyframe animation for any object in your scene for most parameters. For others, we might need a few tools, and Animate is this little tab here, and that is something that has to do with non-linear animation and a few advanced features. So yeah, those are the things I'm going to talk about. Heat, of course, a new heat integration that we get with Daz Studio. That is a service, external service that lets us bring in animations and retarget them on the fly onto the Genesis 8 or 9 figures from a large library of things. You currently get 2 months free access. So it's a subscription service that has nothing to do with Daz, but they've made it so that you can use their animations with Blender, Unreal Engine, Unity, as well as Daz Studio with a very clever integration, and we're totally gonna have a look at how that works. So it looks like 57% in the room are total noobs, which is fine. So I'm gonna take it really nice and slow. And 26% of you are intermediate users. So that's good. And only 15% are power users. So I hope I have something for everyone. But that gives me a bit of an idea of let's focus on basics of animation before we press on. So let's go with the timeline first here. So the timeline object, if you want to follow along, just the regular timeline and a regular primitive, perhaps a cone will do. So let's start with that before we get on with figures and character animation, because that is the more difficult of the two subjects. So characters really work the same as primitives. They're just a lot more confusing because there's so many more parameters we could possibly animate. So a primitive is going to do fine, I think, for now. The basics of animation really are that we can set keyframes, which locks in everything about, or most aspects about, an object, and then we can move the timeline forward and tell the Daz Studio what should happen to those parameters at a future point. And it is then clever enough or any animation software is clever enough to interpolate these values. So if I've changed something like the height value here, or the Y translation, then it will calculate over a period of time what happens there. That sounds really, really simple, and that's really what animations are all about. And if you do that to many parameters at the same time, then we have something that really comes to life. What makes this slightly more complicated is how do we tell Daz Studio about making this change happen. So there's different types of interpolation, for example, and there's also different types of telling it what to do. Sometimes it does things automatically that we don't want to do, and sometimes it doesn't and we wish it did. So we have to constantly check and double check, is this really working? And so as a really, really simple example, and I don't know if many of you have fallen into that. You think, hey, I've got a cone and I'd like for it to be, we've got 30 frames currently down here. I'd like for it to be sort of at the top in the middle and back at the bottom on the bottom. So what could be easier than just moving the playhead to 15, right? I'll move this up and I see some things happening here, so this is great. So I'm going to go and move it back to the front, and you think, yeah, but it's not at the bottom. So wasn't it just there? Why doesn't it do that? Because if I did now move it manually onto the bottom and I do that, you go, okay, fine. So that's good. So that does this now. So why didn't it do this in the beginning? Why didn't it automatically set a keyframe there? Well, that is by design. And that is, if I just go and undo this, something to get in the habit of. If you select an object and you want to animate it, the first thing you need to do in the timeline here is set a keyframe. And this is that button that makes that happen. It creates a keyframe for all aspects of this object. So anything, translation, rotation, scale, any morph sliders, if you go and click this button here, then it'll set a keyframe for everything. And you can see that this little chevron sort of icon appears here. And that is Daz Studio's way of saying somewhere here are in fact keyframes. This is not a keyframe though, this is a marker that tells you on any of these properties, and I can't tell you which ones right now. All I can tell you is that there's gonna be keyframes here. So if you open this up here, that cone object, you can see another marker that's now on the properties panel here. If you open that up, you can see two markers, it's general and display. If you let's ignore display for now, but go into general. If you open that, you see another one in transformation. That's another, it's sort of a breadcrumb system that is showing you keep digging and you'll eventually find the keyframe. So if you go and click over here, the translation rotation is here, go onto here, and then we find these little red real round circles that tell me a T here, and they look very different than these chevrons. And that's the first thing that I'd like you to take away from this session, that the triangles are not the keyframes. They're markers that show you eventually, if you keep digging, you'll find keyframes. And these things that have a little T on here, the little circles, they don't always have a T on it, but these are the actual keyframes. Those things you can move around, so you can left click and drag them to other positions. You can also select multiple and do that. You can select multiple and do that. There we go. And sometimes I gotta say, the timeline features in Daz Studio are a tiny bit buggy, and sometimes they don't do what you'd expect them to do. And sometimes they introduce issues. So, if something weird happens, doubt the timeline rather than yourself. So that's the basics. But then also, in order to actually get to this view, you might have a timeline that doesn't look like this at all. So I want you to have a look at something else, just so that we're all on the same page here. You can right click on the timeline button here, and then this long menu comes up. You get the same menu if you go and click on this little disclosure sort of hamburger icon here. If you click on that, the same menu comes up, and there's something called preferences, and then up here you have something called view mode, and that can be set to basic, intermediate, and advanced. And if you're either in basic or in intermediate, then you'll see that the timeline looks like this. So that's very different. We see there's a keyframe here, but we can, other than play the timeline back, we can't really do anything. We can't set any properties of this. And this is the same in basic and intermediate. I don't know what other options intermediate has. I think we've got a few more bits and pieces so we can set keyframes, but we can still not see things about our objects. So really what we need to do in order to work with keyframes, we need to go and set the view mode to advanced, just in case yours isn't. And you're thinking, why does my timeline look different than yours, Jay? That is the reason why. So that's it. lesson over. Let's all go home. No, that is there's more to it than that. So another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the duration of how much we can animate. By default, if you make a new scene, you can see that my timeline ends at 30 here. And at the bottom left here, there's some other options that we can set. So 31 is the total amount of frames that we have. Right, me too, Dartenberg. And the thing is, sometimes there's so many overlooked things in the basics that you think, had I known that, my animation life would have been so much more easy going forward. One of those things. Indeed. I think there were once the viewing options. They were once they were easier to access, but recently the team really have done a revamped job of the timeline. So there's a lot of under the hood work that's gone in there. So visually it looks very different, and there's also some different integrations that have gone in there. I don't think I've even caught up on most of them. So on some of them, yes, but on all of them, I don't know. So total is currently 31 frames, and 31 is because we have frame 0 plus frame 1 to 30. That took me a while to calculate that as well, but that is why we always have one more than the actual sort of frames that we see. We always have frame 0 and then frame 1 to 30, and it doesn't really matter. It's just something to get your head around. So we have range 0 to 30, and that is 31. If you wanted to extend the range, if you say, well, 30, that's in normal human speak, that's just 1 second of frame time, even though you can animate at different frame rates. Like video games often use 60 frames or something higher because they want these incredibly fluid movements. There's also Disney rides that do this at very, very high frame rates. But usually what we see on TV is, if it's shot with a video camera, it's usually done in 60 frames, like ENG footage, like the news footage, that's usually 60 frames. 30 frames is sort of half of that, so it saves a bit of data rate, or it used to back in the day. And anything cinematic, that's usually around 24 frames. That's what movies are shot at. And the lower the frame rate is, the less information you have in between each frame. So the implication is that if you had a camera pan that goes fairly fast from left to right, you see it shutter the less frames you have there. But the more frames you have per second, the smoother it'll appear. For us 3D folks, that means the more frames you have, the more time it'll take to render, because animations always take a really long time to render. So 30 is a really good way to get started, because you can easily duplicate it into 60, and you can also whittle it down at render time to 24. So that's overridable at render time. But to think about it, 30 is a good way to think about 30 frames as 1 second. So down here then, if I increase this number from 30 to something bigger, like 120, then I can see that, total, if I go and increase the total number into something like 121, that'll be 0 plus 120, so that's 121 frames. If I do that, then I can see that my whole timeline sort of increases, and it gives me more time to play with. So that means this here is now 1 second, this here is now the second, this is now the third second, and this is now the fourth second at 30 frames a second. So if you were to shoot at something at a different frame rate, then this would be different. So we have to just keep in mind what frames per second we're shooting at, and that will then give us an indication of how long we'd like to animate. So 120 frames is a good starting point. I've got my object here. I'm clicking I've got the plus icon already clicked. That sets a keyframe, and I can go and start animating. So let me go and put this to, let's say, frame 20, and move my guy up like here. You see that Daz Studio has automatically created a keyframe, and that is often useful, and sometimes it's also not useful, because when you move your objects for a global translation, that you want to put objects into the scene first that you want to animate later, make sure you do all these adjustments on frame 0. If you don't do that, then like now, if I thought I was on frame 0 but I wasn't, I can see my object is moving. So it's just one of those things to be aware of. Maybe at frame 40, I'm going to go and bring this guy down again to 0. You can hack in the number values here. That is possible. So I'm going to go and type in the number 0 here and the number 0 here. And then we go from here to there. So it only goes up. So there's only one value that's being animated. And if I go and do that a couple more times, I could go and copy and paste the keyframes from here. But note that that doesn't always work on the timeline. It works, but there's also errors that are being introduced. So let me go and try this. If I go and grab these two here, and then I just go right click, I can go and copy the selected keys, and then I go maybe to frame 60, at which point I'm going to paste this and that in. So 60 and 80 should now have a keyframe. If I go and say paste, why does that not work? Paste it on here. How exciting. So go and copy this and go and paste. No, paste doesn't work. How interesting. Does one work? Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. Does this work? Nope, it also doesn't work. What a shame. So that's one of those bugs that should work, and it clearly doesn't. So it's one of those things. It's a shame. But yeah, one of those things. Maybe I'll go and select it. Does that work? Let me go and do this again. Could be. Copy. Yes, I think it's going to work now. See, one of those things. Easily mistakable, that. So now I can do it again. Paste this in here. There we go. Now this thing moves. That's cool. If you look at it, you think, hey, that's all nice. It goes up and down. That's perfect, and it keeps doing this forever. This is nice. But if we go and look from, not in the perspective view, but if we look at it from the front view, so that we just see, I'm going to go and line this up just here on my viewport, then you can see that as this guy, oops, sorry, I'm going to go and line it up here at the very beginning. You can see if I go and do this, scroll through it, you can just about see it on the first frame. There was, what a shame, I can't show you now. Sometimes what happens is that this doesn't go in a linear fashion. I think I might have set this to linear. Sometimes what happens is, and this is happening by default, is that on this moment when it goes down, it doesn't go down to the end, it goes down a little further. And that's a bit of a puzzling phenomenon, because it means the interpolation isn't linear between these keyframes. So as Daz Studio calculates this, it goes and starts accelerating slowly, then goes a little faster, and then goes slower again. And that is this so-called TCB interpolation. That's a logarithmic curve. TCB, I think, stands for tension, control, and bias, I think. And that is a mathematical formula of how this interpolation is being calculated. If I go and change my value down here, you can actually do that. There's these TCB values here. T, C, and B are all at 0. But if I go and choose, like, say 10 for the C here, I'll just type in 10 here, and then I go and play my animation back. Let's see what happens now. Does anything happen? Oh yeah, there we go. It goes and seems to wobble quite a lot. So it goes, it's changed how this thing animates, and it's bizarre because, you know, that's what did I do there? It's this interpolation curve, and this only happened on these two keyframes where I've actually, that I had selected here. So there's now this wobble here, and that's sort of nice if you wanted to have something that doesn't interpolate in a straight line. So yeah, TCB, one of the things you can play around with. 10 might be a little bit much. If I just want a little wobble, perhaps I'm going to go and just on the C value, make a 1 there. Or maybe I'm going to go and select all the keyframes, put a 1 in all of them, and see what happens there. So now it does this sort of, you know, it doesn't do smooth movement. It does this sort of movement. Very interesting. This test cricket board, yes. Yes, I think filmmakers prefer 24 because of our viewing habits. That's something else that's interesting. We can reap the rewards for that as 3D animators, because we get basically 20% less frames to render, which is nice. So because 24 frames was very early film animation standard when they discovered photographic film, and then soon after they found that they could, if they draw multiple frames in the same place, they realized that 12 frames, if I change the frame 12 times per second, that's just about enough to fool the eye into thinking this is fluid movement. Anything below that, you could still see it's a little jerky, but 12, they reckon, was very smooth and very fluid. So when the movie production started, they decided that if we double that, it'll look much better. And correct they are. It's a standard that's survived until today. Time-corrected brilliance. teriyaki chicken bread. Maybe that's what it stands for. So I'm going to go and set my C value to 0 because I want to show you something else, and that has to do with the setting on the actual keyframe. So if I go and open my cone up now under properties and under general and under transformations, and then I'm going to go into the translation, and I'll see all these little icons that have a T on it. So I can. The X translate doesn't actually need to be here. So this is where you can actually manipulate the keyframe. So let's say I didn't do anything on the X axis and I could really just grab these two and delete them. My intuition is to just press the delete button on the keyboard, but of course that is not something that the timeline listens to. It will delete my selected figure, and I think we've all been in that situation where we've accidentally done that and then the figure is gone. So what you have to do instead, don't press delete or backspace, you right click and then you go and choose delete selected keys. Very, very, very important. There we go. So this is that. And this little icon on the keyframe, that actually has a meaning, and T means, it's an abbreviation for TCB in fact. And TCB can be changed into a linear value. If I go and use this button at the bottom right here. You know what? I'm going to just go and take my face away because then I don't have to zoom. I'll just still be here. You just won't see me for a while. So there's this little icon here at the bottom. It's the interpolation type, and if I go and click on that, I have an option to switch this between TCB, linear, and constant. If I switch this to linear, look what happened to my keyframe. It's no longer a little T, it's now a little L, like the Jamiroquai song. And I don't know if it's going to work on a single keyframe, but if I do this on a series of keyframes, like all of these, and switch this over to linear, they all turn into L. Then as I play back the animation, you can see that the object now behaves very differently. So it doesn't go and have that looping motion anymore. It doesn't have that logarithmic motion anymore. It now has a linear motion. And sometimes we need that. So it'll kind of depend on what you need in your animations. If I wanted to make I'll copy this and then I'll put this to the very end so that we have this guy animate to the very end here. So paste that keyframe into here. Paste, come on, there we go. If I wanted to animate a turntable animation, for example, I want my character to rotate in perfectly, what's the word? I want the thank you, yes. J is merely a figment of our imagination. J isn't even here, that's true. So if I wanted to animate a turntable animation, which we can do later, if you wanted to showcase a character or a piece of clothing from all sides, then you need that linear motion. There's another type that I can show you, which is the constant one. Constant doesn't really sound like it would do all that much, but it can. It doesn't interpolate at all. It just goes and switches from one value to the other. And that's that little C in the square. So if you go and do that, it will change values at the moment it comes to the keyframe, but there's no interpolation value at all. Oh yes, Movie Magic. I attended that live seminar, by the way, and for that I will actually bring my face back because that's kind of cool. Movie Magic is a workshop Daltonberg gave a month ago or so, and in which he shows you that. And this is one of those things that he's going to talk more about this, but it's important to understand that if you do animate something that isn't a cone, if you have something like a scene and 5 characters and there's driving cars in the background, you don't have to do all this at once in Daz Studio at the same time. You can render this out as elements and then composite this later on. This makes your rendering life faster. This is going to make your production life faster, because imagine like a branch that goes into your scene and it sort of wafts around in the foreground. You only really need to animate up and down and the branch and the transparent background, and then you just loop it 20 times and then the branch keeps doing this and you think, hey, this is awesome. But you don't have to have the branch be part of your scene all the time. Or like the ripply surface of a water movement, for example, in a river. you can get away with probably rendering 1 second of that and then just looping that. Foliage like grass or whatnot, you can render a second where that thing moves on a little plane, and then you put 20 of those around that all move maybe in in different sizes and clusters and all that, and it'll be much easier for your compositing software to put this together than it is for Daz Studio to render the same thing out 20 times. So there we go. I'm going to take my face away again because now we're going to get to the more meaty stuff here. This is this was all fair and square with primitive, but let's see how this works with characters. So they work the same. I'm going to go and make a new scene for this. They work the same, but it's a little bit more complicated because they have so many more features. And this also brings me to another little bit of a workflow tip that I have for you. As you develop your animations for your characters, I strongly recommend you don't do this with fully clothed character with hair at subdivision level 5 or so. That is not going to work. It's not going to make you happy. Even something as simple as textures on a character can mess with the fluid playback of your timeline. I'm going to set this to 61, so I'm going to have 2 seconds worth of animatable material here. My recommendation is to work only with the gray characters. You can dial in a morph, so if you want to work with a custom character, that's okay, you can do that, but work with the gray character, no textures, no clothing, no hair, and also at base resolution, because that gives Daz Studio the easiest way to preview this. So let's make this guy have do some exercise, just as an example. I'm going to use Power Pose for this, and this is going to be kind of our sort of sample project that we're going to use. At the beginning, I'm going to go and set a keyframe here like this, and then I'll go maybe to frame 15, and then I'll use my bend controller here, make him go bend down. This is going to make Daz Studio set keyframes on all these properties here. I'll close this down, go back to frame 30, at which point he's going to go up again like so. And then maybe at frame 45, we want him to go back down again, like so. Very good. And then frame 60, we want him to go back up again, like so. And if we play that back, then we should see him bending. If I were to put clothing and all that on him, this is not going to look fluid. It's looking fluid-ish at the moment, but just something as simple as a bit of an outfit is going to make a big difference there. Let me just go and try the base t-shirt and some shorts, and maybe even just the skin material. So maybe do we have something like Fabrice's skin? Even though that doesn't add much more geometry, if I go and play this back now, you can see it's still fluid, but you can see it's not as fluid as it was a minute ago. And you can imagine what that does with hair. So I mean, just for a laugh, I can probably try hair from the start. From the starter essentials here, so it's not great hair. It's probably not going to fit him all that well, but you can now see this is really slowing down here. So that's sort of the problem, which is why I'm saying if you have this guy wear armor and there's all kinds of LIE things on there, it's not good for Daz Studio. So do this with the gray characters. Jeff, the gray characters, the difference between these and this guy is that there's on the def load here, you don't have attachments. So this guy doesn't have, if I go and load this guy in, he's going to have eyelashes and eyes and a mouth. This guy doesn't have that. So it's like the plainest, most basic character that you can use. These guys are basically like this guy, but they have skin textures and a morph applied. That's the only difference. What you can do to spruce it up, because you might have a character that is slightly different. I'm going to go and delete this. I'm going to go and use my def load again. You can go and dial in the parameter of your custom character, because they might look different and that has animation implications. So if you do that, then you have to either save out a shaping preset, or you dial this in on the parameters tab. So I'm going to use maybe something like, I don't know, a Mala. let's do that. I can dial her in, so that changes the def load into this character, and you feel free to animate with that. That's okay. Yeah, just be aware this doesn't really have doesn't make a difference, but skin textures do, and hair and clothing that does. Yeah, so you can do that. Another thing that makes a difference when you animate characters is that they should be in base resolution, and we've talked about this before. That's under the general base mesh resolution. There's here high res versus base res, and that means that Daz Studio doesn't have to calculate the subdivision surface modifier all the time. It's the same resolution that it's the resolution of the base character, but it gives Daz Studio much less work as you play this back. So animate in base res, and then when it comes to final render, go and switch this back, even change this character into your character and give him clothing, give him bits and pieces. And Daz Studio makes that really easy. So if you have an animation prepared and you have the base character here now, and you want to turn this into something else, let's say maybe not a dog, but maybe a Jamal, for example, by Matari, I can go and just double click that character. And even if there's an animation on here, this dialog should come up, and you can then apply this character to the selected figure, and everything that the figure has applied to it will still be intact, but this is now going to be replaced with the skin textures as well as the custom morph. So that is something that I'd recommend you work like. I'm not going to do it here because, you know, that's just for demo purposes. So let me show you something else, little basics about the timeline. Once again, 60 frames will do. There is something down here under types that's currently set to, mine is set to TRO. I think TRS is something that it comes up with by default. And those are the types of things you can show on the timeline. And let's go and build our little exercise animation once again. First of all, to give it a little bit of practice here, plus icon here, then add frame 15. With power pose or whatever, we go and do this. Then on frame 30, we go and go back to this position, just roughly. You can also hack in the values, but just so that we understand how Daz Studio ticks under the hood here, we set these automatic keyframes here. Now the TRS means what is actually shown in the timeline. So if I go back to the front, I can do that with this icon here. This here switches to the next key. So if you have a lot of keyframes and you think, yeah, well, I need to go onto the next keyframe, you can just go and click this, and that gets you to the end and to the front. And this here steps frames forward or backwards. This is something where you can enable or disable looping. So if I play this back now, it goes and automatically goes back to the front. If I disable that, then it only plays the timeline once and then stops. So I like this looping feature here. So TRS then, this shows me keyframes for translation, rotation, and scale. And currently that doesn't make sense, but if I go into my hip rotation here and just look at the spine and then into the properties for the spine, I do have that. I have the general transforms and bend, twist, side, side. That's the rotations. And I've got the general transforms and the scale here. I don't have any translate values there, but they would also be shown here if my object had that. So maybe, on another object, like say my trusty primitive, or the top figure of the figure here under properties, this is where I can see that. So this is the translates. This is the rotates, and this is the scale. Now scale is something that I don't really need. So there's really little reason for me to even see that in the timeline. And that's what the types is all about. If I go and disable scale, the keyframes for scale are still there, but I don't see them anymore. Likewise, here I'm animating my figure in position, so I don't need to see translation either. So I can just disable that. And then that gives me a better way to not see so much stuff in the timeline. So that's kind of that's easier for me to see what's going on. There's other things, this is why I'm really bringing this to your attention. There's other things like called other and alias and hidden, and those will show you things that you currently don't see. So we talked about morphs earlier. So if I wanted my guy to exercise and at frame 60, I wanted them to turn into a bodybuilder, that I can go and animate that here under actor, full body, maybe body fitness is at that point, you know, a lot, and maybe fitness details we've got, maybe heavy, maybe he's got, you know, maybe he's packed on some muscle, on a muscular. Let's do that. So let's do that. So this, you know, through a lot of exercise, I can see my characters now, you know, get muscly, which is great. But if I look closely in my timeline, there's really no way I can see where these morph properties have just been animated. So I don't see anything. All I see is the properties of my base node here, and then of every bone that is attached here to the character. So that's where this comes in. So those morph values, they fall under something called other. So if I enable that, I can see that under my properties of the base node here, I now see all these things that I see familiar from the parameters tab here. So mine would be under actor, and then there'd be like a full body here. And then there's going to be, is that a base? I think that might be a base. Yes, there we go. So that's now here the body, muscular details, body fitness, that's been animated. So that's where I can see my keyframes here. So if I wanted that to happen a little faster, or I wanted to move this around, I can go and take the fitness and move that maybe to over here. So at that point, it'll now be, you know, he'll have all the fitness details on frame 30 rather than frame 60. Whereas the other things, as you can see at the top here, they change a little later. Yeah, so that's the properties. So that's the morph values, but that's also true for all kinds of other things. That there's another thing that you might need, and those are aliases as well as hidden. So hiddens, we often don't deal with hidden things, but aliases, they are practical. So aliases, just in case you're not familiar with that concept, is that I can have a controller or a morph slider appear in a different part of the figure more than once. And a classic example for that are the expressions. So if I leave aliases off, the expressions, we find them, if I go to my figure here, they're in the pose section. So I'll close down my actor, I'll go to pose controls, there is head, and then there's expressions here. So that's on my base figure, but really they're not here. These are all, they're really all aliases for where they really are, which is on the head of the figure. So if you have a property that appears in multiple parts of the character, then what you might think is the actual root property of that might really be an alias. And you might be tripped up by thinking, hey, I can see the value changing here in my parameters tab, but I cannot see this on the timeline. What gives? And that is often because you have an alias. So if you do that, if you do animate any sort of morphs or any sort of expressions, I also recommend you switch on alias. Scale is something we rarely animate, so you probably don't need that. Translation and rotation, depending on if you do need it, those I do recommend you have that on. And hidden is one of those things we probably don't need it, but if there are aspects that you expect to find on the timeline and you don't see them, you know, enable hidden. And I think that's gonna show you what you're looking for. Maybe that's what happened, Jeff. Yes, maybe that's what happened. So let me show you something else, and we can interpolate poses. We can animate anything that we can do on any of these sliders, with the exception of surface properties. That is the one thing that we can't natively animate. But my man Alvin Bemar has a product called Abass that will let us do that. So we're not going to go through that just now, but just know that you can do that. You can change an object from green to red on the timeline, just not natively, but Abass can do that. So if I stick with my, muscular animation here, and I'm thinking, well, this is all nice and stuff, but I think I've forgotten to animate his arms. What am I going to do about that? I should really animate his arms. They should be by his side. Okay, I could go in and say, hey, I'll go back to Power Pose and maybe I'll do this. On the first frame or just with this. I want the arms to be down, this one and that one as well. That's great. So that's the arms, and well, now they stay there. That's nice because they weren't keyframed. But if I wanted to go here, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I need to go and maybe move the arms out a bit. You can do that sort of. Maybe with the other mouse click, maybe like that, and then like sort of like that. Follow the arms, and this is how you build your animation. But it's very tedious, and it also means, well, maybe I'm going to move the underarm here, something I don't know, something like that. That might be good. It's like something like that on this frame. Now I need to go back to here and animate that back. That's going to be tedious because I have to go back to sort of here. I have to kind of find out where the keyframes are. This is all going to be. This is a lot of work, and there is this tool. There we go, we've got it. There is this tool in Daz Studio called Animate, and that can help us with this because we can animate in layers. And that is something that I didn't really appreciate the value of this, but it is really, really cool because it means whatever you set here is all set somewhere mingled in the same group of keyframe properties. So as I now animated the exercising as well as the arms as well as the hip, this is now a big mess of keyframes. So if I go and look here and if I drill down deeper, I see everything is sort of mixed in with one another, and that is really problematic. So that's where Animate can help us out, especially if I wanted this guy to exercise like for 2 minutes. Do I really have to go and animate this down and up like 55 times? Thankfully not. We can go and animate this once and then let Animate go and loop this for us. So for the creation of these loopable Aniblocks, you're going to have to use the full version of Animate. You can't use the light version. So if this says Animate too light, you're going to have to go over to the store and buy it. And I believe it's on sale right now, so it might be a good idea to do that. And then head over to up here under Help. Once you get it, go into your Daz Studio account under serial numbers, grab the serial number, and then get over to Help, About Install Plugins, and then you go and type in the number there, restart Daz Studio, and then light will change into Animate 2, and then you can reap the benefits of this. So it's a powerful little thing. On one hand, it can turn keyframe animations like these that we've just made into loopable Aniblocks. But you can also use it to animate directly here on this Animate timeline, and it has a few benefits, and I'll totally tell you about this in a moment. Let's try to turn this masterpiece of an animation that we've just made here with all the crooked arms and stuff, and to go and turn that into an Aniblock. Let's go and do that. All you have to do is somewhere in this gray area here, right click and then choose to create an Aniblock from Studio Keyframes. And when you do that, a nice little window comes up. I'll usually choose the second one here, transform, and because we've also had more values, I'm going to go and do this as well. Click done, and then it goes and thinks about it for a second and gives us this blue strip here. And that is my Aniblock. You still have your keyframes intact, but when I play this back now, slightly different playback controls here. Things are still working. The guy's still turning into, muscle man. The Animate timeline is in charge, so not the keyframe timeline. In fact, you could now go and delete the keyframes from here. In fact, no, they're gone now. Excellent. So they're gone now. Perfect. So now the Animate timeline is in charge. And the beauty of that is that if I wanted to have him exercise for several minutes, I can just go and click on this, left click and drag this out, and then go and have him exercise for, well, I don't know, maybe 12 seconds. These numbers up here, they are seconds now, so that gives you a bit of an indication of what you're doing. This little kind of wedge here, that is the same thing that we had here with the total number of frames. So if you go and left click and drag that to the end, then this is synonymous to changing the total frame value here. So the beauty of that is, if I go and play this back now, this guy keeps exercising for longer and longer. Granted, I don't have a great transition here as he goes from non-muscle man to muscle man, but also notice we don't have a pop there either. So that's another thing that Animate does, except for when it loops, of course. If I go and have a closer look at this, where he's fully muscle man, as he goes back, it goes back to the non-muscle man, but it doesn't do that as an abrupt cut. It does this by an internal blend. And this is what Animate's really designed for, that you have something like a small action that you go and loop it. So you have a 1 second block in which somebody walks forward. Then Animate could copy this block 30 times, and then he goes and walks for 30 seconds, always in a straight line. And we'll see how to do this with the new heat animations later. So that's sort of, you know, kind of nice here. And before we get on to that, I just wanted to quickly show you how you can animate on the Animate timeline directly. And also a funky feature that I didn't know existed either up until fairly recently, which is something called Constrains. That's quite nice. So just a few pointers about the timeline, or the Animate timeline here. Whenever there's this little gap, this means the Aniblock is looped. When you go and move it back to a single one, like so, we have the original that we've just copied from the keyframe. So if we wanted to have keyframes and then turn them into an Aniblock, that is easy to do. It also says unnamed, so if you go and click on this, if you right click on this, you can go and rename this and then also save that. So let's talk about that first before we go on. Rename is fairly straightforward. I'll call this one exercise maybe. And now I know what it is, because if I have multiple Aniblocks, then, you know, that's going to be a bit of a problem here. So that's exercise, and I can go and save it by just right clicking and saying save as new. So where this is saved is sort of up to me. I can pick any location here, but the cleverest is if I go and save it in my main library under something called Aniblocks. And this is where I am already, because this is synonymous with what you see here, down here. So if I go and open that, it shows me subfolders of stuff that I already have here. So like there's a subfolder called Animate, and there's a subfolder called Dance. And if I do that, then I see all these blocks laid out here. And if this was made for the correct figure generation, which it isn't, this is these blocks they come with Animate and they're made for Genesis 8. So if I go and do this, then I can see my guy isn't really doing all too well. So he's still sort of exercising, but he's also, you know, moving around now. And if this was a fully fledged animation for this figure, it would go and preview this, and then I can see, is this something that I want? So in order to keep myself organized here, I'm going to go and I'm going to go and right click and save this as, I'm going to make myself a new directory under Aniblocks, and I'm going to call this one animation stream perhaps. And in this, I'll have this exercise one. So I'll say save, and it looks like it hasn't done anything. But if I go up here and I think, what do we need to do again? We just need to go and open this a couple of more times. I think it just doesn't automatically update here. Or any blocks? Was it Animate? No, where is it? Animation stream, there it is. Sorry, totally missed it. There is my directory that I've just created here. And in it, there's also the exercise block. So if I hover over that, he now does the animation that I've just chosen here. So if this isn't here and I've got 10 things to choose from, I can go and just hover over that and think, hey, this is awesome, I want to use that. Drag it onto here, and then duplicate it as many times as I want. And that's how I can build my animations in a much more user-friendly way than it would be possible for single keyframes that I would use on the regular timeline. So let me go and do something else while we're doing this exercise, and I'll just go and constrain this to one block here perhaps. Control and mouse button will scroll this up or down, much like the same as with the zoom control here. If I wanted to have some bigger controls here, I want to animate in layers. So this is going to keep it really nice and compartmentalized. If I wanted to have him do this, maybe I'll go and put my little playhead back here. If I wanted to have him do this, but also look left and right, if I wanted to animate his head position, I can go do that with a track. So these plus icons here, they will allow me to add another sub-track to my animation. And this is empty right now, so I can either go and copy keyframes from the timeline again, or I can go and create myself an empty block here by right-clicking and saying add empty block. Our previous one happened to be 2 seconds long, so I'll make this one 2 seconds as well, but it doesn't have to be. You can make it shorter, longer, it doesn't matter. These things, they meant much when this plugin came out, no properties, is going to work just fine for us. And here's our second unnamed Aniblock. And because I want to keep myself organized, I'm going to go and right click on that, rename that into head turn immediately. And I can also rename the subtrack by double clicking on that. I might just call that head turn as well. Oh yes, sorry, there's a couple of things that we see here. There's add and override, two override options. What these are doing is basically telling the subtrack, I want to add this current motion that I'm going to animate on this track on top of the bass track, which is the main track at the top here, or I want to completely replace what the bass track is doing. So you could also do that if you had a walking animation with the arms down and you want to replace the upper body movement with something that makes the arms go up, you would replace it. If you have something that already has arm motion but then digging into the hips, you would go and add, because that is something that you can then use to take the arms out overall and global, so that, you know, they don't interfere with maybe the original animation. So we go and say done here, just so that you know where that is. These blocks, there's a lot to animate. If I go and click onto onto an Aniblock, then I'm in Aniblock editing mode. And here I can go and do things like change the playback speed and stuff like that. If I wanted to have him exercise more, like if I do this here on exercise, 100% is the playback speed right now. But if I go and have him exercise at 120%, you can see that the Aniblock isn't 2 seconds anymore. It's shorter, but he's now moving faster. Likewise, if I wanted to have something, if I wanted to have him exercise slower by typing 80%, and then, you know, he exercises slower. So you can change speed with that without having to do any retiming. That's very convenient. We'll leave everything at 100% for now and start animating from scratch in this head turn Aniblock here. You click into this once, and then it says double click for keyframes. So if you go and double click on this, then you're in this other weird mode that now lets you select, set fairly simple keyframes. I'll select all, and this is the button that sets keyframes. 0 is a good button that lets you set this back to the 0 position. I wish more animation applications would have that. Minus key means it will delete a key. So plus key doesn't work on the first frame. It's just one of those things. It just doesn't work. But if I'm thinking he goes down and maybe he wants to look to the left now, let me go and use the head controller and go. Is that the left? No, that's right, isn't it? There we go. That's right. That's left. That's his left. My right. His left. It sets an automatic keyframe here. And it doesn't really interpolate between anything because that's a global adjustment right now, and it overrides what I have on my top track there. So slightly further over here, maybe he wants to go and look into the middle again, or maybe over to the right, I don't know, something like that. So he's going and moving his head from here to there. And maybe now at the bottom, he wants to be at the bottom. Think about it for a second. And then maybe here he's back at the dead center, so to say. But what is the dead center? I don't know. Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? I can't really tell. It's one of those things. So you can go and tell Animate to put a 0 key, and at that point it just goes and makes these values 0, and that is his 0 position. It's still a keyframe, but the position of that is 0, and that's kind of helpful, and I think we need that at the beginning as well. Let's go and set a 0 keyframe, and then this override track is sort of done. So the beauty of this is that you can add other motions to this without having to guess where in this unbelievably deep keyframe structure is that actually. So if I wanted to have him move up a leg while I'm at it, what would I do? Well, two things really. I can, in one thing, and this is the easiest one, is you can go and click plus to have another subtrack, and you call it legs, for example. And then in legs, we need a new Aniblock. So create an empty block, and we're going to make that 2 seconds as well. And because we're organized, we're going to rename it into leg motion. And then in leg motion, we're going to start animating this. And once again, on the first frame, I can't set a keyframe. So click once, double click to go into that. And maybe once he does that, like here, I want him to move up a leg. So let's go and do that, and then move down a knee, like so. Just do that with one leg. But then, of course, when he here at the front, I want it to be a 0 keyframe, so I don't want it to do that here. And I also don't want the leg to come up all the way to here. So really, I want him to go down first, like to here. So I'll set another 0 key here, and then I want the leg to come up, like so. And likewise here, I want that to be a 0 movement again, so I do that. And then he does this, so now it's got his leg movement there. And the beauty of this is that this is all completely non-linear, and you can go and move this around. You can change the timing of it as well. If I'm thinking, hey, this leg movement thing, that's great, but I wish it had come in a little bit earlier. What I do, mess around with the curve editor? No, I just go and maybe grab this, make it slightly shorter in the beginning, and then go and move it away, and then I go and change the timing of it. I'll just do that, make that leg come up later. And if I'm thinking, hey, I want the leg to move independently of my other bits and pieces, I can go in here and maybe he moves his legs at, like, say 180% speed, and then also he keeps moving that, so I can go and extend that like so. So move up and down, and just go and give us more leg movement. So maybe even with say 300%. It is so exciting. I mean, we didn't know, you don't know these features are there because the company that made it has been out of business for many years. So now he's doing this with his leg, you know, that's kind of, but I've only animated it once. So you can see the potential that it has. So I could have another track for the arms, and I can have another one for the hands, and, you know, all kinds of things. So quite exciting. Maybe we'll make it a bit slower here, like 200. So there's other things that I just want you to know about those. Each track, like say this track here, if I go double click into this, there is this thing here that says base. So we're on the leg track, and I've animated my legs, and that's all good, but know that there's other levels inside this track. So if you make really complex animations and you want several types of leg movements on the leg track, you can go levels deep. So maybe this one here was his right leg. If I go and switch this to level 1, it's still going to work, it's still going to be intact, but I can now go and animate something else about the legs, or about this particular leg, on the next track. So maybe on this track here, on level 1, I want to go and do the other leg. Like this. We can still see I've got the keyframes here, and we still need to do something about the 0 keys here. Like at this point I need to have a 0 key, very important, because he can't stand on this one leg, and this is sort of adventurous here. So but now I've got multiple leg movements, but I'm organized, because I've got a base track for one leg and then another level for another, and you've got 14 levels plus the base, and this is specifically designed so that you can isolate your movements. They're still part of the same Aniblock, so if I now switch the speed of how fast this Aniblock plays back, it means that both legs are now going to change speed. In fact, let's come out of this. This is to get out of keyframe mode, you click this. If I wanted to do this at 300%, both legs are moving at the same speed, so they're not independent, but you know, the movement itself, the keyframes itself, you don't end up with just a massive streak of green here, and you can still get organized, and you can see what's what. If I wanted to remove a keyframe, that's actually with this here, so that goes and gets rid of that keyframe here. There's a color code behind the madness. I believe the green is rotation, and then there's blue for translation, and then there's also red for morphs, I think. You can, Jeff, that's exciting. Let me show you something else, and I think I might go and use a completely new figure for this. I think there's no point in saving this here. Let me go and grab a new scene, empty scene, and we bring in our Genesis 9 figure once again. Oh, there is actually something. Can I undo? Is that possible? No, right now that's not possible. I could have baked all of this back to the timeline, and then you would have had something that you could save as a post preset and an animation that you can save over to Unreal Engine. I totally forgot to show you that. Maybe we'll do that in the next one. It's basically once there's something on here, you right click and then say bake to Studio Keyframe. So we'll do that in a moment. Let's start by bringing in our DevLoad character again here. Here he is. Do you know? Very clever. I'm going to pour myself another cup of coffee. There. And also, I mean, I can show my face quickly, so I'm still here. This is not just a tape playing back. I just thought I'd say hello. That's still here. Let's animate directly on the Animate timeline, because that is also cool. Maybe I can actually stay in Vision, because I don't think we need anything on the right-hand side. Let's do that. Let's do that. So on the Animate timeline, let me go start again from this here. You right-click in this sort of strip here, not down here, down here. And you say empty block, and let's go and say 2 seconds was good. There is actually a setting in this. If you right click on Animate Preferences, there's some preferences that you can set if you wanted to make empty blocks, and they're also always supposed to be a certain amount of seconds. You can change that. You can also, if you animate on the timeline, on the Animate timeline a lot, you can go to the zoom auto switches keyframes block mode, so then you don't have to click and then double click. You'll be in keyframe mode immediately. So that is more if you're creating animations. If you're putting them together, this should be left off. So there's things that you can set here. And let's go. And did you say there was something called auto adjust? Yeah, there we go. Auto adjust. Thank you, Daltonbeck. So click on this little guy and say auto adjust, and then it goes and snaps directly to the end of that. So if I make that, whoops, if I make that longer or shorter, thank you, Daltonbeck. Good thing. Let me show you something that is exciting, and that is called Constrains. And this is only available on the Animate timeline. Brian, you'll be interested in that as well, because it's something that I didn't even know Daz Studio had. Imagine you have your character and he wants to pick something up. He sits down in a bar, goes and does something with his hand, and goes waves at somebody, grabs his beer glass or his coffee cup, goes and picks it up, and the coffee cup moves. And then eventually he's done with it and he goes and puts it back down and does something else with his hand. That's difficult to animate, because if it's a static pose, you could just go and parent the coffee cup to the hand, but then whatever he does with his hand, the coffee cup also does. So you need to find a way to have the coffee cup not do that, then eventually attach itself to the hand, have the hand move or any other body part, and then also stop doing that at one point. And that's what constraints do. And constraints are actually a separate tab in Daz Studio. You get there by going Window, Panes, Animate to Constraints. You can open that up and then dock it somewhere. So I'm going to go and dock it over here. And that works only in conjunction with the Animate timeline. And let's say he needs to have a prop that we can play with. Let's say we give him a primitive, just like a ball for now, like a sphere, 0.3 meters. That might be. That's large, but I think for our demo it's gonna work just fine. So just making a really crude animation here, once again with power pose with this guy, and I'll take his arm and move that forward, and I might go and rotate his hand. And let's say at the beginning his arm is sort of yay high. I go and click into here, double click into that for keyframes. Technically I need my my 0 keyframe, but I can't set that at the moment, so I'm going to go like maybe to 1 second here, at which point I'm going to go and put that down. And then now, I don't know why it does that, I can go and set a keyframe here. So he goes down and then he goes sort of up again to here. Like that, right? So now let's see if we can attach the ball to it as he does this. So maybe the ball animates and jumps as well. can mix and match as well. You can animate some things via the timeline, some things not via the timeline. Without spending too much time on the hand adjustment here, let's imagine the ball now sticks to his hand, or wants to stick to his hand. That's done with this constraint. So we need to go into here and add a constraint first of all. And that's just the object that we're then going to go and animate. We have a choice of 4: parent constraint, position constraint, follow, and string constraint. Parent is what we want to do right now. Parent means it'll temporarily attach itself to something else that it didn't do before. Follow and string are very similar. They go and follow something. Follow does it sort of at a distance. So you could say like something like a string I'm pulling, and my pulling motion, something further up follows that down. And a string is something similar that goes and does it as I come closer. It doesn't follow. As I go to a certain position, it goes and follows, but it doesn't do that if I drop it. So think of a dog on a leash. So the hand and the dog, they wouldn't follow one another unless you pull the leash, and at that point the dog gets pulled. That's the string constraint. Playing around with that, we're going to just use the parent one. And you can double click to rename it here, of course. I'm just going to leave it at that. And at this point here, I want the ball to be parented at 100% to this. Oh, sorry. No, I need to go and say source and target. So the source is going to be my man's hand here. Source and target. So source is going to be, is it his left hand here. Perfect. So that's the source, except the target is going to be my sphere. And then this percentage slider is basically what's supposed to happen at which keyframe. So at 0, I want really nothing to happen. At this moment in time, I want this to be 100% active, and I want it to stay there. And this is sort of how that works. So now the ball is attached to his hand, and now he could go and maybe drop it again. So I can go, let me go and extend this Aniblocks. So 2 seconds was obviously not enough. So I'm gonna go and animate the ball at a later point. If I go out of here, I can go and extend this by, when I'm not in keyframe mode, I can go and right click, and then I say, no, that's not it. I go and right click, no, that's not it. I double click, and then I go and right click, and then I say add length. There we go. Let's say add 2 seconds more to this. Now my Aniblock is a bit longer here. That's exactly what I need, because I want my ball here no longer to be attached. Let's say at like 2.5 seconds. At this point, I'm going to go and take the constraint away, and now I could go and animate my ball away again, I suppose, to here or something. And that is how a constraint works. So I haven't animated the ball going up with the hand. That is the constraint that did that. All I did was then go animate the ball from here. So with a bit of tricky cleverness, you can attach things to other things and then make them, make your animations exciting. So yeah, Animate can do that. Animate can do that. So that is constraints. It is, isn't it, Jeff? I gotta say, it is. It's one of those hidden features that we all need to know about this, but we don't. But we didn't. So let me just quickly show you how this works. If I have an Aniblock here like this one, and I'll rename it into a hand test perhaps. If I wanted to turn this into keyframe animation on the regular timeline, so currently I'm animating the sphere on the regular timeline, so that hasn't got its own Aniblock. That is something I can probably just go and put the sphere down, and as the ball kind of bounces up, he goes and chucks it like so. If I had given this more thought, this would probably look really cool, but it sort of doesn't. So the sphere is already animated here on the timeline. Let me see what happens if I go and right click here and say bake to studio keyframes. So this is now going to translate the all the stacked Animate animation that I have here and turn them into things that are tangible keyframes that makes it possible for me to save this as a regular animation pose preset. It also makes it possible for me to send the animation over to other things like Blender and Unreal Engine. So Bake to Studio Keyframes, it goes baking transfers the information in Animate to the DS timeline. Control is transferred over to the DS timeline. Simply re-enable the Animate tracks when you are ready. Continue. Yes, let's go do this. Boom. So if we go into here now, it has probably disabled this track. And all this keyframe animation is here. Is that cool? Including somehow the constraint. I don't know how that worked. All I can tell you is, hey, this is how it's done it. So very interesting. And you can see that these are now all keyframes here on all properties of my figure. So this makes this very difficult to now adjust. If I wanted to go and make a quick adjustment, this is what most animations look like if you bring them in from the store or from Mixamo or from Heat. This is what they're all looking like. Usually they have a keyframe on every frame, and that means there's very accurate, predictable movement in here. But it also means if you want to make an adjustment, that's going to be very, very tricky. You have, oh wow. How's the Coke going? Did you know we have kosher Coke again in this Easter time? Kosher Coke is the one with the yellow caps, in case you haven't seen those. That's the one that's made with sugar, and it's also blessed by a rabbi. But it's mainly the real Coke, not the Diet Coke. The regular Coke is they're both blessed, but the regular Coke is made with sugar versus high fructose corn syrup that the normal Coke is made with. Much like Mexican Coke. I just thought I'd let you know that. So let's talk about Heat and how we bring animations from Heat into Daz Studio. Do we have it open here? Yes, we do. We don't. Let's go and navigate there. Heat. If you type that in on the, not head, sorry, it needs to be with a T, Heat is a plugin for Daz Studio, and it is available for free, so you don't have to buy anything. It is a subscription service, but it is a standalone little application that lets you tap into the library of Heat animations that they have, and it lets you export and on the fly retarget them to Genesis 8 and Genesis 9 automatically. Those animations can be converted to Animate, can be adjusted with the layer system that I've shown you, and they can also be sent back to the regular keyframe timeline so that they can then be used in the adjustable form in things like Unreal Engine, but you can also use them just as they are in Daz Studio. And with the magic of Animate, you can blend these things together. You can stack Aniblocks together that you've made. So over the next half hour or so, I'm going to go and bring over some of these and then save them out as Aniblocks and then string them together, like, walking and waving and, overriding things and so forth. So let's go and do this. You have to sign up with an account with them, but the good thing is that if you claim this here, then you'll be able to get 2 months worth of service for free from them. I believe their plans are free, which gives you 25 moves, $25 a month for the mover category, and then the Pro also gives you access to the same amount of animations, but you have commercial usage rights as well as larger character storage. So we get this for free for 2 months, and I say do this. I have to go and log in, I believe, in a moment, so I might have to go and for you to not to see that, but that's we can do that. I'm gonna go and start with a brand new scene here. And once again, with my DevLoad character, I know it's boring, but it's one of those things that works the most reliable. Well, I think you get 2 months free from the moment you sign up. So I think if you sign up today, then you'll get 2 months from today. I don't know how long the offer is going to last, though. But I think every user gets access to this. So Heat works by, let me go and just quickly do that, and then I'll go and sign in here, and maybe I can show you stuff. it's one of those things that doesn't remember my password. Oh, it does today. Oh, how exciting. Oh, that was fast. There we go. Perfect. Once you're logged in, you go to this screen, and this lets you download the plugin. There's also a massive download button down here. If I just go and move my face away, here's download heat, and then this lets you download heat in a variety of versions. So for Unreal Engine, it supports animations, sending them straight to Unreal Engine, and also uses the bridge to send this over to Blender, Unity, and Daz Studio. So this is the thing we need. You've got some instructions here, but I can summarize them for you. So download this, then extract it. It's a separate little program that you need to run. And I think I'm gonna go and do that. No, sorry, this here. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. There, go away. No, this there. Excellent. So that little program that needs to run, and I'll just type in heat here, and that's the heat bridge. It's an app. If I run it, then that is where I bring in my animations here. This is this thing that's now going to sort of lurk around. Oh, I need to sign into here. Okay, fine, good stuff. So sorry about that. Let me go and sign in here, because it's one of those things. Sign in, and this is the screen that doesn't remember my username and passwords. Can I remember? Let me see. Was it this? Yes, fantastic. I'm so proud. I remember the password. This is great. So this is what the bridge looks like. You can make it full screen to see all these animations. When you hover over them, you see what they look like. Don't be put off by the red and green color combination. That is a little bit trying on the eyes, but yeah, these are all the types of animations that you can download, and the list is seemingly endless. It's very, very nice. Pushing buttons. This is kind of nice. Walks over here, pushes buttons. Very nice. But you can also search for things. So if you look for running, and you can see all the running animations, and you don't have to have it in full screen here. Apparently, and I haven't tried this out yet, but you can upload your own animations. There's also soon going to be a marketplace where you can buy additional animations. So this is one of those things to watch out and look forward to. At the bottom screen here, we have an option to let the bridge know what do you want to export these animations to. So we're going to use Daz, but Unity and Blender would work just as well, I would imagine. I haven't tried those out, but Daz Studio is the one that I would use, and that is that. Before we do that, though, we can't just go and send it and expect Daz Studio to kind of know what it needs to do with that. We just need to go and just quickly check if we're connected here. I'll close my constraints window down and open up another pane, which is in fact the heat animations pane. So you get that by right-clicking anywhere on this empty space anywhere, or you can head over to Window, Panes, and then if you've installed the plugin, open heat. I should have mentioned that once you've downloaded this, you also and bought the product on the Daz store, which the free product, you have to use Install Manager to install the heat plugin so that Daz Studio has this pane. And it also gives you an option to download the heat bridge from here. Mainly what it's saying is the heat bridge is connected. This is what you want to see. If you're not logged in to heat to this to the bridge here, if I was not logged in, this would not say the heat bridge is connected. So you have to be logged in for that. Other than that, you don't have to use this pane at all. You can just go and close it, or you can move it around somewhere else. You can just, I'm just going to go and ignore it for now. We know we're connected. I just want to have it close by. Yes, I can. That's my limit, though. I can remember 2001 passwords. This is the problem when I sign up with a new service. What am I going to do then? So let's go and say we use the wave over animation or something. The casual root loop walk. Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. Root loop walk. Simple step. That's a dance animation. Dance animation is good. Let's do that. So this is as simple as it is. You have a character in your scene, right? You have the heat bridge connected. You have an animation that you like. You click on it. You see a little bit of extra animation about it, like how long is it? In my case, 109 frames. So just keep that in mind. Pick the target application and hit import. It goes and downloads this for you. I can go and minimize that. And the timeline is populated with them keyframes. That is quite exciting. The Bridge also knows if you're using a Genesis 8 or a Genesis 9 character. As you well know, Genesis 8 poses and animations don't work on Genesis 9 and vice versa, but the plugin is sort of clever enough to look at what's in your scene and then just send over the right animation data. Pure magic. The only thing it didn't know how to do is get my timeline to the correct frames that my animation had. So I just need to look at that 109 frames. So let's type that in here, 109, and then we're there. Bob's your uncle, Betty is your aunt. So now go play this back, and I've got my guy, Genesis 9 guy, doing that animation. That is kind of cool, isn't it? Just use the same password for everything. That is a great idea. That is great. My password is going to be 42. That should work. Oh no, dang, 8 characters. I gotta say, I'm looking forward to 7-factor authentication. 2-factor is just not secure enough. I need 7 separate phones from separate manufacturers on separate carriers. And then we're gonna crazy. So that's how that works. But that's only one animation. What are we gonna do next? So one thing that's a shame, and I think I need to bring that to their attention. The height of the animation isn't correct. My gizmo is sort of below my figure, and I really don't know why that is. It may have something to do with the fact that this is a root motion. That is possible. Let me go and take all my nodes away here, just so that we see this a little easier here. Yeah, so this is another thing to be aware of. Motion on a figure shouldn't really be on the base node of the figure. It should be on the hip, and this will let you use the transform controls on the root node, on the base node, on the root node, to say, hey, I don't want you to do this in the center of the scene. I would like you to dance somewhere over here. And currently that's a little tricky, because I can see I've got keyframes on the hip. Rotational ones, lots of them, and so there's motion on sorry, that's the root property, isn't it? Sorry, that's here, general transforms, rotation or transform. There we go. I've got transform information on my root node, and that isn't great, because if I wanted to do something about moving this character around, I'd have to go and get rid of all these and then move it elsewhere. So there is a little script that 3D Universe has written in case, and not all heat animations are like this. Some of them are like that. This is why I'm mentioning it, because I see this here. In our case, I think I can probably, can I? No, see, this is actual motion data, so I can't just delete that because it changes frame to frame. So there's a little script by 3D Universe that's called body to hip, and it will go and translate this and move it over to the actual hip bone on which it should be. And you can run that. I'm not going to do it for now, but you can run that to move this this information away, because the tricky part is if I wanted to move this guy and not have him dance in the center of the scene, I want it to be, dancing at the bar over here. The moment I do that, only the first keyframe was overridden. So it's tricky. I can use Animate to make a layer change to that. Or another thing that you can do is you can create yourself a group and then parent the selected figure to this. And then you can make that positional change on a group, like to somewhere like here, and then when you play this back, the motion is not going to happen over here. But yeah, if you've run into this, that is the reason. If you've got an animation from somewhere and you think, I really want this to take place at a different point, a group is a really easy fix for that, but it means it'll make this a little bit more cumbersome. If you wanted to apply that transitional positional change on the actual root figure of the root node of the figure, then try body to hip. I think that is part of Animation Tools Set 1. Do I have it? Under Utilities. I thought it was. Let me see where that is. There is Animation Tools. So in here under utilities, there's this. There's a couple of things here. Body to hip is the one that we want to use. So if I go and run this, then it'll detect this is what it is. Animation range is fine. Let's go process this, and it takes a moment. And now if I go to my root position, I still see keyframes, but they shouldn't move anymore. See, if I go and look at these values, they're not moving anymore. So now all the information that I need for my animation is baked in here. So I can go, and I don't think I need any of those. Delete, select the keys, perfect. So now, if I go and move my character over here, it now dances because I've forgotten to change the last keyframe to the same one here. Sorry about that. That's probably because of some other keyframe that I've overlooked, namely this one here. So let's go and take that away. Delete. There. Now my guy's gonna, whoops, dance somewhere else. Benevolence. Yeah, but this is how heat works, and this is also how convenient it is. You can also now see that the position of my hip bone, of my manipulator is correct. It is now at the bottom of my figure, and not like 2.5 feet underneath him, because that's not what we want. Okay, one other thing before we have another look at a few other animations from Heat, how to save them out, how to convert them into Aniblocks. If I have an animation here and I'm thinking, hey, that's not what I was looking for, you can't clear the whole timeline of things without having to select all the keyframes. And that, once again, that is in this little contextual menu. If you click on that, you see clear animation, and there's several sort of layers of this. If you say clear figure, it'll clear the whole animation out, and then all the keyframes are going to be deleted off this selected figure. There's a few variations of this, like figure pose, figure shape, that would leave the pose alone. Selected items, so clear figure will literally clear everything in the scene. Clear selected items, selected pose, selected shape is only the one that you've selected. So that's kind of good for us to do this with a clean slate, bring up our heat bridge and find something else. Like sleeping, that's good. So we have a sleeping animation, that's neat. You can use this viewport also to move around. Alt left click will do that. He's sleeping. Or is it a static pose? I can't tell. No, it's fine. It probably is something with a breathing animation, I would imagine. Silly walk, the boxer. Let's say walking. Let's see what walk animations they have. Casual walk. Now that's nice. Let's go and do that. Casual walk plus that. Import. Sending, it says. And here it is. How long was it again? This was 470 frames. Okay, so that's the only thing that I need to remember here. Make that 470 frames. That's a lot of keyframes. Look at that. But there's also, yeah, there's also motion applied on the root figure. And this is bad now because it means this forward motion is sort of baked into there. And I think it would be better if we'd use that script body to hip, just so that the height of the character isn't changed, because this is gonna cause problems when there's such root motion on there. It's just something to be aware of. I'm gonna leave it alone for now, but just know there is that script. If you do need the motion on the hip instead of the body, it'll avoid issues at a later point. Maybe I'll just quickly run that script here, body to hip. Process takes a second. Manipulator is now in the correct position, and the guy still walks. Also, I now sleep easier. You can easily do casual walks lying down. That's great. So imagine you like this animation, but 470 frames is just not enough, and you wanted to blend this with something else. I think what's a good idea is to, before you do any sort of conversion work, save this animation out so that in case you screw something up, you can always go back to this original thing or grab it again from the heat bridge. I've got animation promo here. This is nice. I'm gonna go and make a new folder in here, and I'm gonna call that one heat animations. And this one was called, what did we say? Wasn't it casual walk v3. So we go, and with the figure selected, plus icon here, it is a pose preset, even though we're saving an animation, pose preset, and then we give it that name, let's say casual walk v3. And then in here, instead of current frame, you can go and save the animated range, save everything. But you can also, if you need just a static pose, you can just go to something like this and then go and just save this out as a static pose. That is possible by the same token. So pose preset, if you have a long animation, if you think, hey, there's like 3 or 4 really good still poses out there, just go and do that. This is like a still casual, I'll call it, and just say current frame, and then that will save out just a single animation here, a single pose of that. So very neat. It's a very neat feature. This is why I think Heat is a nice just pose generator. You know, don't spend money on pose sets anymore. Just go and browse a few animations and go, hey, this is gonna be great. Unlimited bits and pieces at your disposal. Fairly nice. So I've saved this out now just in case we want to go back to this. But if I wanted to extend this or blend this in with other things, let's see how that would work. So transferring the keyframe information into Animate, we've seen is very easy. So you right click on this and go create Aniblock from Studio Keyframes. Transform, we don't have any morph value, so just go hit done. And now we have this as casual walk here. I might go and rename this casual walk v3, and I'm going to save it as an Aniblock down here as well so that we can blend it in with other stuff later. So save as new, and this is going to be casual walk v3. It's going to take my name here, save that out, and we're done. So if I wanted to keep him walking, just go and extend that. You know, have him walk for 20 seconds. This here, right click auto adjust will do that. I'm going to click Control F periodically because I want to show you this exciting thing that he actually keeps walking as he keeps walking forward as he goes over the loop in the Aniblock. See that here? This is really at the end, and you would technically expect him to snap back to the beginning point at which he walked, but that's not how Animate works. It just goes and casually extends the position. So you can literally have this guy walk forever and ever. You might have to tidy up that intersection there a little bit, but in principle, this is really good news. So he just keeps walking. That is exciting. So you can keep walking. If you have a really long setup, if you wanted to have him follow, you can do that. And then, of course, with our layering technique, if there is anything that you find doesn't work with your character, let's say you had, it's a woman and they're wearing a very wide skirt. Imagine you'd need to override the arms that need to come out because they're sort of digging into the hip, or maybe your character has has wider hip issues. Then we can use that layering technique again that we've learned earlier. Click a plus icon to get a subtract going. Right click on here, add an empty block. 1 second is fine because we're going to make one single adjustment at the front here. And that is, and that is, click in it again. And that is the arm. So power pose is your friend in this case. With my manipulator, it might be nicer. So just make the arms go out a little bit. This one and that one. And if I wanted to have that be the position from now on, I need to do nothing else. This is it. All that's in charge now is this override subtract, and then we're good. Like say this is a heavier weight character, a heavier set character, maybe he's going to walk a little bit slower, so we could make him walk at say 70%. He still does his thing. No no foot sliding as of yet. You can cut Aniblocks up as well if you think I want to make a cut here and have him walk faster from a particular point. You can do that. That's possible. So all this power is at your fingertips. And what I also like, and I think I've saved this, but you don't see this updated here down here. Our exercise block also works. So it would override or add itself onto this thing that we've got in the scene now. This doesn't automatically update down here. If you go and just quickly go one level up and one level down again, you can see that I now have my casual walk down here, and I can bring it back at a later point. So if I go and remove this, remove that, and if I'm thinking, hey, now I'm ready for you to do casual walk, it works just fine. Let's see if we have an idle animation. Let me go and get rid of this, and let's go back to heat and find an idle animation that we can go and blend in with this animation. So that's going to be nice as well. If you have a different animation and you want to string them together, but you don't want that to be popping, and you don't want that to be the positional offset bits and pieces. So let's see if we have something like there's a button pushing animation, wasn't there? That was kind of cool. Pushing buttons V1. There we go. He walks over here. That's no good because we might just have to live with another one. How about this one? You push button, you walk over here, and then you push a button. Hey, that might work because he keeps walking forward, so he continues the walk. That might be nice. So he walks somewhere, he keeps walking slower, and then he pushes a button. Let's see if we can do that. So this is like a really long animation here. 865. Let's do it. Daz Studio, yes. Import, yes. Downloading. This might take a little longer. And it's 865. Okay. Survey says, here we are, 865. Here it is. Very cool. And does it work? It does, and I can still see I do have root motion here, so that's not good. I got to tell you, I got to be brutally honest. That's one thing that I would probably change on the fly on import, I think. But for us, it's fine because we have that clever little script. So get yourself a copy of Animation Tools Set 1 by 3D Universe, and then before you do anything else with these, because it will avoid issues, there's body to hip. Double click that and then just go and process this. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Big shout out to my moderators, by the way, Miss Julia, Mr. Dragonade, and Mr. Zero Calvin. Very good. Brian, aka Zero Calvin, has done an enormously amazing printing job for me recently. We bought a second pen display because Julia needed one in her office, and I went for the one that didn't come with a pen holder, which is such a shame. So Brian went ahead and said, let me see what I can do, designs a little bit of 3D stuff, prints something overnight, and oh my god, now I have a pen holder. So this is exciting stuff. And we also need to add one frame. Daltonbeck, you are so right. We are not going to use the end of the animation though, because we've decided we're going to go maybe from here to sort of here. So that's another thing. We want to just have a little bit of that animation. Let me see if we can go on and crop that out in the Aniblock. We don't want the end. We don't want the beginning. Let's see how that works. That's another thing that you can do with Aniblocks. Just cool, good stuff. Got the animation. We can save it. So again, this is probably a good thing we should do in case we screw things up. Pose preset. This is an animation that we're going to save, and this was called button push. Excellent. That is I can remember that. If you had a second monitor, it's kind of convenient for that window to stay on the top. Button push. A whole animation range. Go to Animate. Create Aniblock from Studio Keyframes. And we don't have morphs, transform. I don't know if there's a big difference between these things, but transform seems to work fine for me. I think I've had issues with the front, with the first one, but I might have made that up. Let me go rename that. This one was called button push. Whoops, totally misspelled that here. Button push, and let's go and save as new. Button push, I'll just call this long, because I want mine to be like button push short. So I'll go and rename this into button push short, because then if I go and do this at the bottom here, that'd be nice to have an automatic refresh here after every save operation in Animate. That would be quite nice to do that. So now I've got here button push long, and I can go and do some editing on this animation. So I'm thinking he hesitates a bit and then he goes and moves. He's also not moving as fast as I want, so not as fluidly. So maybe I'm going to catch him as he's just moving here, so without the hesitation. So just like when he's walking already like this. And this is what I want my Aniblock to essentially cut. And I think I can do that with this. This means I can split the Aniblock at playhead. If I go and do that, I go and create myself 2 Aniblocks. And that's nice because I can go and drop this part now, and I only have this part. So I can now go and continue my other motion that I had earlier. I'm going to go and move that slightly further over here. Take casual walk, bring that onto my timeline here. Let my guy walk, and then go and push this next to that. And what Animate's going to do there, if I find my character, here he is. What Animate's going to do there is going to go and blend these 2 motions into one another. Well, it's going to try. It might not be super successful because our feet might not line up as we continue the walk. So let's see. They see there's this pop here, and that's because my second Aniblock starts differently than my other one ends. So I might go and have to take some bits and pieces out here. There's something else that we can do, and I think that is the foot alignment. Where is that now? Was that this here? No, that was invert. That was reverse. We can do that as well. That's mirror. That's also not what we want. This is align to guide. That's also not what we want. That's the internal lineup. Maybe Datenberg, you can help me out there. I'm not sure how to do that. Does that I tell this block line yourself up with the previous one, with the previous animation, or am I mixing that up with iClone? Maybe that is very possible. Maybe that was a feature in iClone. So I don't really know how to do this. And maybe we need to go and just make this block a little shorter and hope for the best there. Oh, that's Carrara, right? I knew I had seen this in some animation. So this might work. It doesn't look great, but it's, it looks better than it did before. It looks better than it did before. So he goes and starts walking briskly. Oops. Then sort of slows down. Maybe I can go and make him start walking slower earlier, or we can just go and make this whole speed of that Aniblock maybe like 70%. Position is still correct. So now he doesn't just briskly walk, he's a bit slower, and then he slows down even more, and then he goes and pushes the button. So that is quite nice. I thought, oops, my animation wasn't quite extended correctly. There we go. So he's coming back. Oh, the green gradient is the slider that you can go and blend more. Let me see if that works. This is the green slider that Datenberg is talking about. Let's see if that yields a better result. It does. Also switch off your manipulator here so that I think we can live with that. So bloke comes around, goes and slows down. There's this magic machine right in front of him, and he goes and presses a button. Is that cool or what? I don't think I have a magic machine, but maybe I can go and create one from a block. Sometimes less does the trick as well. Yes, I get you. Yeah, so if we go and if you find yourself, you know, scary machine from your library, go and bring one of those in. I'm not going to just make myself one from my man the cube here. This is one of those late 1960s IBM tape machine, imagine. And we're basically just where Mission Impossible just begins. Good evening, Mr. Phelps. And goes, pushes button on crazy machine. Is this cool or what? And I think that's just, walks away in disgust because obviously he's had it. With his employer, with his family, with these spy missions all the time. But yeah, very, very exciting stuff. So I think there's exciting potential in there. So yes, I can't wait for that as well. That's going to be really exciting to see what they come up with that with the April Fool's jokes. Hey, this is neat. This is great. Let's tell you what, I was going to show you how to bring this into Unreal Engine, but that'll take some time. So in essence, if you've made something here, and just in principle, you would go and bake all of this to the Studio keyframe timeline. So right click and then bake to Studio keyframes. And assuming this is empty, which it sort of is, you go and bake this whole thing out, bake to Studio keyframes. That's going to take a moment because there's a lot of keyframes. And then you have this thing for the figure as literally single keyframe each once it's done. Once it's done. Then you can go and just send it over as an animation. Send the skeletal mesh first. So here he is. This is now the cube also has a keyframe that's a bit awkward because it should really be at the front here. I don't want this thing to move, so let me go and copy this and then go to the beginning. With that selected, I'll go and paste my keyframes in here, and then I'm going to go and take this guy and delete it, just so that there's no funny business. There we go. Now we don't have that expensive tape cabinet move at one point, because that would be just, yeah, that'd be crazy. Should you choose to accept it? Yes, exactly. So let me have a look at questions. My moderators would have been busy looking at anything you wanted to know in between. And of course, I might not have found that. So if we do have any questions, which it looks like there aren't any, so that's good. If you do have questions, now is your chance to answer them, to get them answered if I can. And if there's anything else you want to see, do let me know. Like if we wanted to turn this guy into, look at that, the speed has been adjusted, so it's all been slowed down, and now we have this as keyframes here. We can now dress this guy up. Oh, you know, I wanted to show you how do we render this stuff out. Man, this is just something I nearly forgot to tell you. It's one thing is animating this in Daz Studio. The other one is, of course, well, how are we gonna go and get that animated? Let me show you something really quickly, because that's something you might also need for animations. I'm gonna go and save my scene out here. I'll call it the tape drive walk. And I will show you how to animate a camera, render that camera out, and also some render settings that will come in handy as you go and get your animations rendered out. I totally forgot about that. So I'm thinking what would look good here over 1300 frames is a slow camera that might start to follow him at first. Like from here, I'm thinking. We start here and then we slowly pull the camera back and then go a bit faster than him and reveal the tape machine, and then hopefully go and just go reveal what he's doing from the side. So we're going to have, this is our camera, and we're going to go follow this guy, move back, and then we're going to, at the end, we're going to be just from the side so that we see him pushing buttons there. Let's go do that. Do you know, it's actually similar to, I've shown this in previous streams, Bob. It's not actually that difficult, but if we do have time, and if you want to go half an hour longer, I'm okay with that. I can do that. So we can do that. Datenbank's also not seen 3D. Simulated hair, no, I think that is a problem, Datenbank. I don't think we can get that into Unreal Engine. Strand-based hair can't be exported, geoshells can't be exported, LIEs can, but you know, it doesn't stop you from being scared. Let's just do this camera animation, and I'll show you how to get this into Unreal Engine. It really is relatively simple. We can also go and change this guy into a real character, so that's also possible. Let's go and start with the camera then. Create camera, and camera animation, you would do that in Unreal Engine if you were to do this, if you wanted to render in Unreal Engine. I'm going to go and switch over to my top and bottom viewport here so that I see what my camera sees in the top. I'm also going to choose my aspect frame, which is not going to be square. So you're going to have to select, say, something like 16:9 is good. 16:9. Perfect. And this is what my camera sees at the top here. Whoops. It might be a little too low. I might go and come in a little bit so that we see my man start walking like that. I'm going to make it really, really simple. Oh, my manipulator, I've just realized, and this depends on what you need here, is currently set to world. So under tool settings, I might go and set this to local for now. This might help me out. So let's call him Mr. Phelps. Make it like a traveling shot. So this is our camera, and that is going to be our first keyframe. So what have we learned? Set a keyframe here. Very important. Then we let the animation sort of commence. He's walking out of frame because we're not animating the camera right now. But when he comes to sort of here, I would like to have the tape machine sort of revealed, ideally. Let's do this from sort of the top. That's easiest. I'm going to go and use these two bits and pieces and see if I can reveal him and the tape machine. And we go a bit lower. This sets a keyframe automatically. And this is how that works. So it's neat, perhaps up until this point. I don't want to be that wide just yet. So let me go and only reveal. This is sort of interesting as the camera gets to here. So I'm thinking let's not be too far away from here. And just pull out a little. So do that. This is the second keyframe here. And we may need a correctional here because we're changing bits and pieces. I don't want the camera to be cutting his head off here. So there's one correctional keyframe we do here. So we're locking him in, then we're moving out, we're maybe revealing who the character is, and then dun, 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 he's there at this crazy machine. And now we need to go and come around and see if we can pull that off convincingly. So at this point, just before he presses the button, I want to have all this shown here. So we turn the camera around, of course, and then go and move this sort of over here. Maybe turn it over a little more to the side. Might have to do that in stages. It's also a little crooked here. I didn't mean for that to get crooked like that. So how does that work? And that needs to have a correctional as well. I think we just moved out a little too far here. I might just go and delete this keyframe here. See what that looks like. That might work. Even though it's not quite the smooth effect I wanted, but hey, it's gonna be good enough. So at here, at this keyframe, we're gonna be more from the side, and then sort of from here, and then it's like this this crazy shot. We need another correctional here, I think. Hey, not a masterpiece, but still kind of nice. At the end, I wanted to zoom out and see him walk away, or dolly out rather. It's still crooked, what the? The Dutch angle makes it. And then we see him walk away here. And we need one correctional in the middle here. There. Hey, certainly not a masterpiece, but we've got something and we want to render it out. How do we do that? Cyberman, yes, Superman, that's right. Hey, I'm really sorry about having you spend so much money. That's crazy. I'm glad you could make use of it. There are really nice tools. Animation Tools has some other funky things to offer. Animate has really exciting things also to offer. Yeah, there we go. That's that's animation, and we want to render that out. First of all, let's go and save it, of course. And then what do? As you iterate over the animations, it's really beneficial not to go for 4K 60 frame render that takes 5 weeks. It's probably good to have something that you can watch in the next 5 minutes or so. And that's where either the texture shaded or the filament viewport come in handy. Both work exceptionally well for really fast previews. We do need another correctional elsewhere, I think, but we're going to leave the animation as it is. So it's 1300 frames in total. And the way this works is you can do two things, and only one of them is what I want you to remember of this. Daz Studio can render out an animation as an actual video, or it can render out an image sequence. And an image sequence is far superior from a video file. A video file is really nice as a really quick preview, but it's prone to crash Daz Studio on longer animations, and it's not going to have transparency, and it's going to have a lot of compression. And if you have a problem halfway through an animation that takes you 10 hours to render, if it stops after 5 hours and you have to start again, there's no way you can bring back the first part of the animation with a video. If you render as an image sequence, it'll be far superior because it renders it frame by frame, and then you composite this in another solution like DaVinci Resolve or Premiere or Final Cut Pro. And it has transparency like a normal PNG file, which means you can also add backgrounds to it. You can use it for compositing. So highly recommend you work with image sequences. So Jeff, too funny. Daltonbeck, yeah, you agree? Absolutely, yeah. As in Photoshop frames, that's right. Photoshop can also be used to composite that. So if you have Photoshop and you don't have anything else and you don't want to learn anything else, let me show you how to do this in Photoshop. 1300 frames is a long animation, so I'm going to go and get the pixel size down a little bit. 1200 by 675 is nice. Aspect ratio is what we see here. So this is under Render Settings General. Render type, you see, is currently still image, but we have these two other options, image series and movie. Movie is the video, and that means it renders images to a temporary directory and then compresses them for you, and then saves it as a video. And that's where things often go wrong. So I'm going to go and do this as an image series. By default, you'll be in NVIDIA Iray for the render engine at the top of the render settings tab. But that means if you hit render now, assuming you have put the correct image path in here and stuff, it'll render this as Iray, and that takes a while. And we're talking about render settings in a moment. For now, I don't want to do that. I want to render with whatever I've set up here, be that filament, be that texture shaded, be that wire shaded or whatnot. So I'm going to go and switch my engine over from Iray to Viewport, or even better, Viewport Multipass OpenGL. So either of these will work. I'm going to use Viewport because that's even faster, and that just literally looks at whatever this is, and that's going to be rendered out with that. And it being filament, 1300 frames is going to be over in a heartbeat here. Render range, we've already set that, so that's what we need. Series base is the name, and the series path is where our animation will end up. So let me set the path first with this. I'm going to go into animations. I'm going to go and set myself a new folder here. I'll call that one heat test, perhaps. That's a good, as good as any. That's my folder. So this is a location in which the image series is going to end up. And now I'm going to set the series base. So I'm going to say this is button pusher. This will be expanded with 4-digit frame code at the end, so I don't have to say anything else. The only thing I want you to be aware of is don't render as JPEGs, TIFFs, or bitmaps. Render as PNGs. That's as good as it gets for this, and it will, for the Iray renders, also include transparency. That is that. Probably good practice to just Control S for a second, and then all I need to do is press render and watch what happens now. It'll say obscuring the viewport may cause issues, so I'm going to say I'm okay with that, and I'm not going to obscure the viewport. And let's have a quick look at the timeline, at how it moves forward. So this is really how fast Daz Studio can render if it has a fast render engine. Still not as fast as Unreal Engine, that would be even faster, but you can see it's going fairly fast here. So once it's done that, I'm going to go into Photoshop, but again, Final Cut Pro, Premiere, After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, they're all going to work for this. But I'll show you this in Photoshop because many of you will be familiar with that, how to go and composite this into a video we can watch. Indeed you can, which is kind of nice. So Premiere is also an option. I would usually do this in Premiere because it's much more performant, and it's sort of made to handle large sequences, image sequences, including 4K EXR sequences. And in the bottom, you can just about see the guy approach the crazy contraption. And one other thing that I should have told you, and really I was lucky to get away with that. If you have a multi-viewport environment, whichever viewport was selected is the one that gets rendered out. So you can't tell Daz Studio to render a specific camera out unless you use a plugin like Manfriday's render queue. So by default, the thing that's now got this orange outline around it is the camera that gets rendered out. It doesn't have to be camera, it could also be the perspective view or an orthographic view. Whatever viewport has the orange thing at the time you press render will be rendered out. But if I had accidentally selected the bottom one, we would now select this sort of CCTV camera style thing. And you love your Fusion in DaVinci Resolve. Yeah, I can imagine. Free, right? Free. I would actually love to just start Photoshop up, but I suppose I can't. So yeah, one of those things. We're just going to have to hang in there for a couple more minutes. So Jeff, tell me, what have you bought then? What have I cost you? Which I didn't mean to, by the way. I'm sorry it's costing you so much money. Yeah, X201. That is. This would be something I could show you in Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine works very differently. Once you've set up your camera or cameras, you can go and put them all into a queue and then just go render all these camera shots. You also have a camera switch track that lets you switch from one camera to another, and it just goes and renders that out. And it is even faster than this. But it also, the knowledge that you need to have to make that happen is kind of off the scale. So I thought, well, it would also take me another 2 hours to explain that, but I'm more than happy to do this on another occasion. That maybe as a continuation, once you have animations made with this, how would we bring those over into Unreal Engine and then render them together with an environment with multiple cameras, and how would we render this out in Unreal Engine? So perhaps that's a good one for next month, for April. That might be kind of nice. Do you know, Lightworks, so the thing is, Lightworks, I remember Lightworks from almost 30 years ago. We used to have a system called Lightworks that was around at the same time as Avid was the offline non-linear editing solution that everyone was going into. And I was working in TV company, most of which, but they also had editing suites where German TV series would be edited, and they did this partly at the time with traditional 16mm editing tables, but they also used the early non-linear video editing systems that worked all with a very highly compressed quality because the data transfer rate at the time was like basically nothing compared to what we do today. So everything was highly compressed, but they could do it on the computer and then generate an EDL that then the negative cutter would use as a guide to assemble the negative. And that is what we then got, and was part of my job, to transfer the negative onto video so that the color correction guy would apply this. We would put the audio track on there, and that's basically my day job in the 90s. And two of these systems, one was the Avid Media Composer, which was the upmarket expensive software, and they're still around in some shape or form. And the other one was Lightworks. So I wonder if that is the same Lightworks you're talking about, X201, because that's quite interesting. Because I'm interested about this because Daltonbeck mentioned DaVinci, and my company, we had a color correction system made by DaVinci, and that is the same company. But so they go back ways, and they had this revolutionary technique to plug in a machine with essentially 3 trackballs that would let you correct the dark values, the light values, and the medium values, all with trackballs, to correct either a film like a telecine or a tape-to-tape correction. And that was how they started. So they weren't into editing, but they wrote their custom software and they plugged it into every telecine and tape-to-tape correction environment that you could get your hand on. And that is what we had, and that's what we used. And that is how I know DaVinci. And that company then evolved many years later into something that is, I think, still around, but is also now making editing software. Isn't that exciting? So one of those things. Is Puppeteer still available for expression changes? And do I have a video showing the ins and outs of using it? Yes, and yes. Do you know what? On the Daz channel, have a look if it's already come out. There is a very recent video that's part of the masterclass that was previously only available to Daz Plus members. It's now available to everyone. So we're rolling out the Daz masterclass in its entirety to everyone to watch. And it's on the Daz channel. And I'm scheduling about a video every 2 videos a week. Sorry. 2 videos a week, and one of them I think quite recently dealt with Puppeteer. Brian, have a look if you can find it. If it isn't there, then I'll assure you, Timothy, this is going to come very soon, because I think it's just aired. So have a look at that. Yes, it still works, and you can also use Puppeteer to use the timeline to animate it. So if you dial in expression changes from frame to frame, all that will be tracked on the timeline as you do that. It's good point, Timothy. It's a really good tool to use that. Animations heat test. Here it is. This is my image sequence. So in Photoshop, I would click the first image, but then also at the bottom, make sure you select image sequence. Otherwise, it only opens one. If I go and do this with image sequence, open this up. 30 frames sounds good. You can give it a different frame rate if you like, but 30 frames is fine. And Photoshop opens this in this mode that sometimes includes a timeline. So here, this thing tells me this is actually a video. I don't have anything to control the playback with at the moment, but if I head over to Window, you can find the timeline here, and then you have yourself a timeline. Thank you. Click the video icon and add media to the track. Yeah, I'm totally going to do that in a second. Thank you. And as you move this forward, the playhead forward, you can see this is our animation. And lighting is debatable. But yeah, you can go, and this is now part of a video group. So if you open this up here, you can do a little bit of compositing here. So altered video, there's all kinds of stuff we're not going to deal with. I'm going to go and make myself just a background color, just a solid color here, maybe something in with the theme of the of the day. Maybe it's like a pink. That is now needs to be underneath my my video. It also needs to be in fact underneath my guy here. Don't I need to, how do I do this again? Oh no, it needs to be outside the video group. Right, and then it needs to be extended like so. There we go, cool. So now I have a pink background everywhere. So this is that still picture. If I go and add something else to it, maybe like a gradient, that makes it just black like so. That might be nice if we go and drop down the opacity of that. And we have just a sort of hint of a shadow here. Make that a bit more exciting. Gradient fill also needs to be extended so that the full video gets played back here. But yeah, now you have that video playing back in Photoshop. And in order to now turn it into a video with all these effects, I can go and head over to Export Render Video. That is how that works, render video. And then you get something similar to the sort of media encoder. And I'll put this on my desktop here, I think. Heat test. And you can pick a transcoder and what quality you want and how many frames you want, but that's basically it. So I'll go hit render, and then this takes Photoshop a little bit of time to now export the video, but with effects, with color correction. So this is how you can do that. Oh, thank you, Dartenbeck. I really appreciate that. There's a ton of knowledge in there. It's 16 hours in total, so it's not to be designed to be watched. It's not designed to be watched in a day. Take some time, and also when you review the sessions, go watch me do it, then you do it, and then do it once or twice more. Only that's really what gets it written down here in the brain. Yeah, 3 to 4 minutes per frame. That's long. And if you want quality with Iray, that's the price you pay. But what I often do is, if I do render with Iray from Daz Studio, what you probably want to do is set yourself a decent size. 1K, I wouldn't go higher than that. 720 also perfectly fine in regards to image dimensions. So 1280 by 720, 1920 by 1080. Remember that 1980 by 1920 by 1080 versus 720p is 5 times the amount of data that you're asking the program to generate. So this jump doesn't seem a lot, but it's 5 times the amount of data. So careful with that. Then for Iray render settings, what I would do under progressive mode, and this is just personal recommendation, I would switch off render quality. Disable that, because that means as you set the max samples, you will get a consistent output from frame to frame. Make some tests, start at 50, try it with 100, try it with 200, and see how long a frame renders with that. Aim for nothing longer than a minute per frame of render. If it takes like 3 to 4 minutes, that is, like you say, depending on the length of the animation, it'll take you several weeks to do this. AI upscaling, so right, Dartenbeck, is so good these days that you can get away with 720p animation that you then upscale with gigapixel to something like 4K. Perfectly doable. And for moving images, we don't need the high-res quality that we need for a still image. So still image, like a promo, you zoom in, you look closely, you look at that. In an animation, most of that gets lost because the change from one frame to another, especially if there's camera movement involved, this is gonna be overkill. So aim for 1 minute render time, and between 50 and 100 iterations. You can go higher if you're still within your time limit. But the other thing that you want to do for all animation renders is always render with the denoiser enabled. It's going to make the AI, it's going to get the upscaling AI so much benefits if you do that. And you have to enable this and then also make it available. So these are off by default. So post denoiser needs to be on, and then it needs to be enabled. And that's basically all you need to do. Do a single still render, see how long that takes. If it's still too long, curb the amount of iterations down to something that gives you the ballpark of what render budget you have. That's my tip. Oh, and then the other thing under advanced, what you probably want to do, disable your CPUs. They contribute 1% increase at the cost of 100% energy. So it's a waste. Don't do that. GPU rendering always beats CPU rendering with especially with Iray. So I would do that. And yeah, do some tests, make sure the GPU is actually being used. If you have this on here, allow CPU fallback, then if your scene or if your frame doesn't fit on the GPU, Daz Studio would say, okay, you don't want me to use the CPU, but I'd give you a black picture, otherwise I'm just going to use the CPU now. And you want to make sure it doesn't do that. You want to make sure it gives you a black frame so that you know what's going on, so that you can fault find that. Yes, do that, because it tries. So if you have that enabled, your CPU is going to try to contribute. Sometimes it's even slowing the render process down. It's because the frame needs to wait for everything that the CPU has done. But mainly, if you have a look in your task manager, you'll see that the CPU usage is 100%. That means it generates heat, and that means your fans are going to be on, and it's not going to be comfortable for the computer. It's not good for power consumption. So yeah, and it brings very little. You can do a test with CPU and GPU, measure the render time, then disable the CPU, do another render, same settings. If you see that there is like a 1 second speed gain, then it's time to not do that. All cores wide open, yeah. Your GPU shuts down invariably. Oh, that is bad. That could also be a power thing. So that's the other thing. If you have a power supply that is just about good to power the GPU and your CPU, it might not be a good idea to do that. So hey, listen, I've said we're going to do Unreal Engine stuff, but we're already 16 minutes over. I think, why don't we then do this as a continuation for next month? So it'll be the last weekend in April. I'll be back and I'll have something prepared, something like this. I'm going to save this animation out, and then I'll show you how to do this, how to send over an animation like this that you pre-built in Daz Studio, and send it over to Unreal Engine so that we can render this out. Yes, to be continued. I can't make any promises, but let me look into Lalo's facial animation product that is called Face Mojo. So maybe, I'm not making promises, but maybe if I get it to work, I can show you how to do facial animations in Daz Studio together with something like we've cobbled together here, and then send that over all together to Unreal Engine for rendering. Because if you're into animations, even if you don't know much about Unreal Engine, combining a character animation from Daz Studio with an environment from Unreal Engine and have that render out in super fast speed is seriously beneficial. So let's do that. And I will see you, I don't know the date, but end of April. Let's do that. It is a day. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them now in the chat. I'll be around for another 10 minutes or so. If I don't see them, send a comment. If you've been watching this video as the pre-record, leave a comment on this video. I do check them all, and the nice ones I answer. The not nice ones I either delete or ignore. And if I haven't seen them, I haven't seen them. It's one of those things. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful rest of Easter. I'll see you next month. Take care. Bye bye.